Hello, Ian, and welcome to Winning with the Wrangler at Dick Powell's Leadership Corner, brought to you by Earth, Wind, Fire, Water Training and Development, where our passion is building leaders of today and tomorrow. The information on today's program was gathered from many different places and people. If you hear yourself in the conversation, it's not all about you. For speaking appearances and other important contact information, just give us a call here at 727-422-1833 or go to our website, ewfw.org, or you can always send me an email, dick@ewfw.org. Today's program is going to talk about some things that I believe are really, important in today's world. We're going to tackle this first topic today called Where Has Civility Gone? Now, the reason I'm bringing this up at this present time is it seems in our nation, as in America, it's even around the world, and no matter where we go, this thing called civility seems to have been lost. So let me tell you a little story. You see, the other day I stopped and, I did the terrible thing. I stopped and held the door open for a young lady at a supermarket. That's things I've done in my whole life. I was taught by an early age, you open the door for a lady. That's just what you do. Well, the reaction was not really what I expected this morning. She looked at me and said in a very loud voice, she wanted to make sure that she was heard by everyone around us. She proclaimed that I don't need you to open doors for me. She walked away in a scowl, and I was left there wondering as to what just happened and why. In my mind, it was a simple act of courtesy. Yet, it wasn't how it was received, and I still wonder why. You see, I was raised to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and yes, sir, and no, sir, open doors for ladies, walks next to the curb instead of the lady walking next to the curb in case somebody drove by and splashed. There was just a whole lot of things that I was taught. Well, I went on to the next store, and on the way, an older driver did not see me and about ran into me. He then proceeded to yell nasty things at me and drove off. I had swerved to make sure that I didn't hit him, and I really wasn't upset because where we live, there's a lot of really experienced folks. And, sometimes, we're all getting a little older. We don't see as well as we used to. But again, I was left to wonder what just happened and why no civility was shown between the two. Now, I don't believe that it's an age or a gender thing. I really don't. It seems that we have lost the ability to be nice to one another. And that's the part that I want to bring to the forefront. You see, leaders, people do what people see and people repeat what people hear. So it's our duty, it's our job, it's what we are called to do to bring civility back into this world. The thing about being able to speak nice to one another, you see, using foul language and vulgarity, I have to tell you, just is not necessary, and I just don't like it. Now, I won't tell you that there isn't times when I've been out in the garage or making something and hit my thumb with a hammer and didn't say some words that I regret. But I have to tell you, it seems like anymore, when I'm out and about, I hear not just young people, but people of all ages using vulgarity as a normal part of language. And that does bother me. You see, it's also in our actions. When someone holds the door for you, just say thank you. When someone gives you a compliment, say thank you. Just simple things. In a parking lot, it amazes me that there's all these shopping carts sitting out there, and My wife and I, we always, when we get out of the vehicle, we grab one or two and we push them back in. It's not a big deal, but we've seen people take the time to try to jump them up over a curb and park them just so they don't have to walk 20 steps back to the store and return it. I'm in awe that we as leaders aren't doing a little bit more to understand that young people are watching us. People from other countries are watching us. Everyone is always watching each other. And I know your mother brought you up like mine. Don't judge a book by its cover, but we all do it. And even mom did it too. Yes, and I want you to remember people do what people see. They do what you do because they try to pattern themselves. And so these actions of vulgarity and non-civility and these things just seem to be procreated. That might not be the right word, but it does seem like they're raised by us. And only we can make that change. You see, civility means courtesy, politeness, manners, good upbringing. In today's world, I see oftentimes more and more that there's just not enough real mothers and fathers. I see a lot of people have children, but I understand also that those mothers and fathers, a lot of them didn't have mothers and fathers who didn't have mothers and fathers who didn't teach them, who didn't teach them, who didn't teach them. And that's a shame. We've lost that world where we worked closely to our family and we learned those lessons, some easy, some hard. But the thing of having politeness to one another, the thing of having good manners is important to this world. Now, here's some thoughts I'm going to shove your way. Because I think this is so important, this thing of civility in today's life. We as leaders have that responsibility, and we as leaders need to grasp a hold of it and make it happen. So it's time to instruct parents that have never learned their manners. Now, I'm not saying go out and beat them over the head and slap them up or whatever, but we can do it in a way where we can have some parenting classes. Now, a long time ago, my wife and I, we were just starting to have our family, and we went to a class called PET, Parent Effectiveness Training. I have to tell you that in that class, we learned more than we had ever known before, and we patterned a lot of our way we taught and raised our children by that, and it was only a good thing. Now, I have to tell you that a terrible thing has happened. I've often gone to the local churches and offered to teach that class. They weren't seemed to be real enthused about it. So parents, let's do something about it. Let's take and not only teach our children, but teach ourselves some manners and how to be nice to one another. Leaders, it's time to ensure manners are an acceptable way of behavior. I think it's time to say some things are just flat unacceptable in our society. Now, I've been told that I'm an old person and I'm kind of harsh when it comes to certain things. That's because I truly believe there is a right and there is a wrong. I do have some gray areas, there's no doubt about it. But I'll tell you what, there are some things that are absolutes. And we need to look at them. Like being nice to one another. I don't think that's a terrible thing to ask. Now, leaders, I'm going to encourage you to take this information and try to find a way to put it in place at your home, at a school, at your church. You see, I truly believe if life skills are taught at home, at school, at church, and they're taught, they're implemented, and they're made accountable, I truly believe that the life we see in America and the world would change. Civility, courtesy, politeness, manners, upbringing. I don't think those are terrible things to even talk about. If you do, well, I'm sorry about that, but for me, I think they're most important. So I'm going to take you on a little trip about practicing civil discourse. This thing of talking to one another without yelling and screaming, without using vulgarity, without having a end to end all ends. You know, World War I was supposed to be the world war, the war to be ending all wars. But we still seem to not be able to get along. In order to practice civil discourse, in order to have a conversation in between two human beings or two parties, the first thing I'm going to tell you is you have to be intentional about building a relationship. I talked to a man the other day. He said, hey, you know what? I don't get this thing. You talk about building bridges and building relationships. And I just don't believe in that stuff. And I don't even believe in this thing called, I can agree to disagree. You see, he shut down civil discourse discussion before it ever even got started. It has to be an intentional relationship. And that intentional relationship does wonders to build the trust. You see, you can't have this relationship unless you have the trust in the relationship. That trust says that, hey, no matter what, we're going to walk away friends. We surely might disagree, and it'd be a terrible world if we all said yes and agreed with everything. And no one had any better idea. No one else had an idea. That'd be pretty scary. But I'm trying to get across to you, leaders, teaching intentional relationships is about building them and building the trust. And when the trust has been built, then as the conversation happens, even if someone starts to raise their voice, we can practice discernment. In other words, we're going to sit and listen until the other person is done. And when they are done, then you can ask those questions. Or you can make a statement. What I heard you say was, make sure that you're understanding exactly what they're trying to say. Sometimes even myself, I get so excited about things that sometimes I say things quickly and people don't grasp them. And they ask questions. Well, they say, well, Dick, this is what I heard you say. Well, no, that's not what I said. Let me re-explain that. And let them go back and do that. But let them take it to the end. And when they're done, it's your turn. You see, setting up some rules. I have to tell you that there are some rules that need to be put into place, and that's you have to say that we're going to do this. We're going to build this relationship. We're going to build this trust. We're going to practice discernment. In other words, we're going to take what we're learning and we're going to think about it before we just jump up to a decision. The scary part in life today is that so many people are listening just enough to have an answer, not enough to understand. And there's a whole big piece there. I don't think we do a very good job in our schools, in our homes, in our churches, teaching that type of thought process. So many times I've seen it in the schools. I've even witnessed it at churches where it's basically sit down, shut up, I'm going to tell you what I want you to tell you. And there's no conversation. You see, that's not an intentional relationship. There's no trust there because it's all one-sided. Why should I trust only what you say and I never get to ask a question? The biggest thing my grandfather did for me is he told me, Dick, he said, always, always, always ask questions. You see, when he told me to question everything, he did me a favor, but not a big one. I learned that in order to be a good, great, just mediocre leader, you've got to find out what others are thinking. And you've got to do it in a way they're heard. So leaders, intentional relationship, builds of trust, practicing discernment will lead you to civil discourse. And civil discourse, I want to describe to you as an open, honest discussion. Not a yelling match, not a them versus me match, not an I win, you lose match, but an open, honest discussion where each side really starts to learn and listen from the other. Civil discourse comes with a no judgment guarantee. It means that we're not always going to agree, but we're still going to walk away friends. You see, the no judgment piece is that it's okay to have your thought process, and it's okay for me to have my thought process, but you never know if we have had an intentional relationship and built trust and practiced discernment. You never know that we might come to a third decision. And that's where 1 + 1 = 3. You see how this can work. Civil discourse also breeds another opportunity. It breeds lasting relationships with the ability to always have those conversations. See, civil discourse used to be taught around the dining room table. I can remember as a young person sitting around my grandma and grandpa's table with my mom and dad and aunts and uncles and everybody else, and believe me, there was some interesting conversations. They were from farm towns in Ohio. They had moved to Florida where there was just surrounded by cracker folks. And you know what? Everybody found a way to get along. They did so because, quite frankly, they knew they depended on one another. One person ran the lumber mills, so you didn't get anything made out of a piece of wood unless it came out of the lumber mill. You didn't get milk unless it came from the dairy. You didn't get any eggs unless it came from Mrs. Brown down the road. You didn't get any greens or anything else kind of vegetables except for Mr. Brown's big plot. Everybody depended on one another. I'm not going to say they always agreed with one another, but that's where the intentional relationships, the building of trust, the practicing of discernment always led to civil discourse, which meant open and honest discussion. Sometimes it wasn't pretty. Sometimes it was going on a long time. And I'll tell you what, sometimes those dinner table conversations, I wanted to walk away. But my grandfather always found a way to keep us there at the table until it was done. And then everybody would hug everyone and say, we'll see you next Sunday. Our family's mostly gone now, and we just have a daughter and her daughter and her husband. And I miss those Sunday dinners. I miss the open, honest discussion around the table. Now it seems like we have hushed discussions in 1 and 2s, not all together. What a shame of what we're missing. Leaders, take this to your people. Understand that people do what people see. If they don't see you building intentional relationships, they don't see a trust being built between you and someone else. They don't see you practicing discernment and having an open and honest discussion with no judgment, but building lasting relationships. Well, I hate to tell you this, but they're not going to do it either. You see, that's why I started off with this first piece, this where's civility gone? Because I believe it moves from one to the other very quickly when we're not doing this. When we're not pulling a chair out for a lady as she wants to sit down at a dinner table. As we're not knowing which fork to eat from, it doesn't sound like much, but it is. When we don't open the door for someone, we don't offer a seat to someone on the bus or railway car or wherever you're at, that it's an elderly lady or a young lady, or, you're a man, stand up. It's not going to hurt you any to be nice. And ladies, understand when you see this old farmer, he's going to come in and he's going to open the door for you. He's going to probably, like my wife, I'll run around the truck and open her door for her to get out. I'll go over there and open the door for her to get back in. You see, those are just things, they're just polite. When someone cuts you off in traffic, try to understand, maybe it was a mistake. You don't have to flip them the bird or yell and scream or anything else. In traffic, slow down. You're going to get there. You see, there's just little courtesies. When you're out somewhere and you overhear someone say something you totally disagree with, well, do you have to chime in and say something nasty? You see, I found out the other day that an old timer, I was kind of interviewing him, and I was asking him a lot of things about some wise words, and he pretty much laid it down on me. He says, mean people didn't just happen overnight. They've been mean most of their life. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, it's a choice. They made a choice to always be negative and loud and whatever. They thought people weren't listening to them. And I have found that people don't listen to people who are really loud. Practicing civil discourse, it's not easy. I'm not going to fib to you. There are people who I just struggle with trying to build that intentional relationship with. I disagree with them so much that it's hard for me. But I also know that people are watching. How am I going to handle this situation? Do I really try my best to build that relationship? Do I do my best to build a bridge, a trust level, so we can have the next step of open, honest communication? When someone tells me that they're not interested in building a bridge, that they don't care, I have to tell you, I almost take it as a challenge to find a way to build a bridge. You see, I think it's that important. I think it's that important when you find someone you just really disagree with, find out why. Is it personal? Is it just guttural? I mean, is it just something in your gut that turns over when you see them? What is it? My grandfather said, everybody's good somewhere, sometime. I was very fortunate to be raised by him, and I guess I've turned into him some ways. I have a granddaughter now, and I tell her these old stories, and she looks at me like I'm really kind of crazy. You see, she's never been on a farm. She's never seen a horse. She's never been out and dug a fence post. I have had her pull some weeds, but she pulled grass instead of weeds. She doesn't quite get it yet, but she will. And you see that civil discourse that happens between her and I. It's even when I find something that I'm not real happy that she just did. There's a trust value between her and I, and I can open and have an open and honest discussion with her with no judgment, not really right or wrong. We need to learn from that. We need to learn from it. So where has civility gone? Well, I hope it hasn't gone. I hope that you as leaders are listening right now, And if you see this young lady who reacted so badly, well, maybe not badly, but I have to tell you, I was shocked. When I opened the door for her, I just did it because that's the way I do things. I took an extra step quicker to get there to open the door for her because I saw her coming in. It wasn't an act of meanness on my part, but that's the way she took it. The gentleman who cut me off in traffic, it wasn't an act of meanness. I don't think he really didn't see me. When I'm at a board meeting or some other meeting, and it's not an act of meanness when someone disagrees with me. As long as we have built that relationship and have that trust, it's just a disagreement. It's not a big deal. But here's what happens, folks. When you haven't been intentional about building that relationship and there is no trust, where there's no trust between the two participants or the two groups, that's when anger happens. And when it starts like a wildfire. It starts little and gets more heated and heated. And next thing you know, the brush is on fire and the fire is jumping to the top of the trees. And it's jumping from tree to tree and bush to bush. And next thing you know, everybody in the room is caught. All because two people didn't take time to build the relationship. I guess maybe I ought to go into a little more about what it takes to build a relationship. It takes time. It takes intentional conversations. Not just one, it might take many, it might take years before that happens. But it has to be intentional. You have to think about it. You have to do it. You see, you have to take action. You can't just palaver and stand up there and talk. And this is where I sometimes get aggravated. I hear pastors stand up and speak, but they don't give any action items on how to put it in place in your life today. I go and listen to professors who have never ever been there, never done it, but they're speaking and teaching our young people. I go into schools today and I find teachers who are there because it's a job. It's not a calling. As I go around the country and speak on leadership, I see leaders in the audience cringe when I talk about personal accountability. I see them cringe when I talk about building relationships with the people that work with you and not for you. I see leaders in all shapes and sizes in every piece of the community shudder when I come and talk about building trust and practicing discernment. I certainly hope that we can get over it and we can move forward. To learn how to practice civil discourse, to take and put it into our lives as a natural part of our world, to take civility and push it even farther, to know that civility means courtesy and politeness and good manners. I see our time is coming to a close like usual. And on behalf of myself, Dick Powell, and the whole Leadership Corner team, we want to say thank you for being a part of today's program. Our hope is that you've received a nugget of wisdom and guidance that will help you build on your leadership ability. If you have any questions or comments on today's program, we encourage you to give us a call here at 727-422-1833 or send me an email at dick@ewfw.org. And when you know that you need one of the best keynote speakers in the country, speaking on instruction or business or personal accountability and leadership, just again, give us a call at 727-422-1833. Send me an email, dick@ewfw.org. You know what? Go to the website, www.ewfw.org. Click on that little button, leave me a message. I'll get back to you as fast as I can. Until next time, DW the Regular saying, ride hard, ride fast.